Thank you very much for being here. As Monica indicated, if you have questions, please just pop them into the Q&A. And let me just go here and share my screen for you, and that will help you see what's going on here. Okay, this is how to design your professional life. And one of the things that I wanted to do is to give you the benefit of my more than 40 years in the job market and over 30 years in search and career coaching. I am very fortunate that I am able to teach business law at the Silicon Valley Extension with a great bunch of folks. And I just wanted to thank everybody for making the time today, because you're all busy people and it's great to have you here. So I just wanted to capture some of the questions. I'll answer some of these as we have in the 4 modules here. And this is what we're going to be covering today. So let me go to this, and great. Is taking ownership, making a plan, implementing a search, and building your lifetime career development practices. So a couple of questions came in the same area, that how people over 65 can get back into the job market and make a decent living. I had another one, how to build a career after 60. After retirement, what types of jobs are better? And how do we as we mature deal with the fact that life always has these twists and turns, and COVID-19 has just shown most recently how many twists and turns are there. So let's start off with taking ownership of my professional life. And I just posed these questions here for you. And I want you to think about these questions, and we will cover them obviously in the course of this hour. And I'm not going to take the full hour because I do want to allow time for one-on-one questions. But these are some of the things you can think about. And again, always happy to follow up and talk to people as these issues come up, and see if we can be helpful for you there. And again, be very thoughtful about the fact that the SV Extension has some really great resources, which I'll just jump into that one actually. I had one question there is, I want to set up an online company. What is the most effective marketing strategy? And I have to say, my recommendation there would be, there are some great courses at Silicon Valley Extension, including SEO marketing, web and mobile analytics, and applied digital marketing. So I would just encourage you to reach out and take a look at those courses. It's a little bit beyond the scope of this presentation, and I certainly can't answer what that is in the absence of knowing what the business is. But I would encourage you, for example, to do something on that score. So one of the things that I think is always important is before you start on a journey, you need to know where you are. I find, the flip side of that is if you don't have a plan, you're already there. And I think this is one of the things that I see very often in my coaching career, is that you have people who have all sorts of ideas, but they don't even know where they are presently. And so one of the things you need to think about, and that's one of the reasons we'll cover here, is that you need to recognize that you need a plan, because the velocity of career change is so fast today. COVID just accelerated it, but this is data that has actually been accurate since the early 2000s. Typical job lasts 4 years, okay? It can easily take up to a year to find a new full-time position. Oh yes, I've been in this business long enough that I don't think I do you any favors by sugarcoating reality. It takes a year typically to find a new full-time position, and that has not changed over the 30+ years that I've been in search. And it's one of the reasons why traditionally severance packages for executives were for 12 months or 24 months, because that's how long it takes to find the next gig. So the result of that is that if it's lasting 4 years and it's going to take you, you should always be looking at options. You should always be considering new career opportunities. I remember vividly back in the mid 80s, the chief executive officer of United Technologies at the time with somebody I knew well, and there was a management meeting, and he stood up and he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, there is no more Mr. Nice Guy in the gold building managing your careers. It's up to you." And I think this is the reality. If that was the case in the 80s, it's certainly the case today, and you need to be aware of this. And that's one of the reasons why I want you to think about this as the start of how you create a plan to be consistently looking at options and figuring out where you want to go from here. The first part here is you need to determine your strengths. This is mission critical. And the obvious reason is why? And the answer is because nobody will pay you if you can't do it. All right? So you get paid for your strengths, not for your weaknesses. So one of the things that I want you to think about is some assessments. I'm not going to go through all of them. There are numerous out there. I have probably done at least a dozen over my career, varying shapes and sizes and expense, but Strength Finders has evolved to become an accepted standard. It's relatively straightforward, easy to understand, and it's not that expensive. And one of the two that's important is that you will get people talking about Strength Finders as something here where you are discussing this with somebody. They say, so what are your strengths? And Strength Finders helps you articulate that response. Because, well, I don't know is not a very effective answer if you're trying to present yourself as a competent professional. So Strength Finders does a good job at this. And what does Strength Finders do? It looks at our strength, 34 different types, and it puts them into a position where you have the, as I say, the top 5, the top 10. Then there's, if you will, the middle. And, how much, what are some of the strengths that you really don't have? So we've got this poll up there, and I'd love you to just answer the poll. How confident are you that you know what your strengths are? So I'll just take a minute here to let you fill that one in. And through the magic of Zoom technology and polling, we should have an answer here. But if you could respond, that would be great. Thank you very much. So let's see, Monica, do we have results? Okay. So the good news is there are some people who are very confident, but the majority are somewhere in between. And based on that, again, I would encourage you to do Strength Finders, because one of the things that happens here is that, let me go back. Oh, dear. Hang on a second. All right. We will, bear with me on the technology here. Get back here and go back here to the Strength Finders. This one here. Okay. Sometimes this jumps back and forth. Okay, very good. So one of the things here, just to have you think about on these strengths, is if you understand these, what it does is it allows you to use those, to lean into those and build on those. One of the things too that it tells you is when you look at the second set here that are not at the top 10, what it is gives you an idea that if you look at the 25 to 34 in this example here, you should look for somebody who can help you with these kinds of skills if you have a project or a work that needs it. So that's one of the big reasons for taking this, to sort of say, what can I do well? What don't I do well? And where can I get help to build on that? I like to say it's important to do strengths because what happens is a lot of times people say, oh, work on your weaknesses. And part of the challenge we have is that if you work on your weaknesses instead of your strengths, you sometimes get into this role of trying to teach squirrels how to swim and ducks how to climb trees. And in my experience, that leads to drowned squirrels and ducks with sore feet. So stick to your strengths, work on those. If you have time, you can find ways in today's world to compensate. So really think about leaning into your strengths and building on it. That's why, as I say, would really encourage you to focus on that. Myers-Briggs is another very commonly used piece. It's based on the philosophies of Carl Jung. And Myers and Briggs were a mother-daughter combination in the late 40s. They used this as a way to actualize some of Jung's ideas. It's actually more a process of understanding how you process information and how you react. But it's become used as a shorthand. Again, it's one of those things like Strength Finders. It is used so commonly that people will say, so what's your Myers-Briggs? And again, it's just useful to know that and have that in your back pocket. And it also is by now a situation where, because it's been around for over 70 years, is there's a lot of data as to what types of people do well, what kinds of Myers-Briggs types do well at certain things. So here, what I wanted to do, just as an example of what people look at here. So do you know what your Myers-Briggs type is today? Just pause there for a second for you to answer that one. But here, this is an example of ESTJ, so extrovert, sensor, thinker, judger, okay? That's 11%. These are like the shorthand, taking care of business. So these are teachers, project managers, supervisors, executives, insurance agent. One of the reasons I popped this up here, good. People, it's about 50-50. That's awesome. Good for you. Again, it's something where it's not that expensive. You can get the official version, and they have a bunch of tools there. And again, this is to stimulate your thinking about what else you could do. So when people are talking about and saying, I'm in this situation here, and there were a number of people who were asking, how do I pivot, or where do I pivot? Okay. Then, for example, if you are currently a flight attendant, okay, and your airline is shut down, as many of them are, and you're saying, what else could I do? What else could I explore? What you see is that physical therapist, nurse, athletic coach, hairdresser, teacher, K through 12. These are just some examples. And again, the idea here is at this stage of the game is to think broadly, because when you're stuck and saying, where do I go? The first thing you want to do is expand the possibilities, explore opportunities, explore possibilities, but expand. And by doing these assessments and the tools that are surrounded, that surround and support them, you are able to take advantage of the stimulation of your ideas and get you to thinking about where can I go forward, because being stuck is no fun. So we want to find ways here for you to think about, where do I go from here? So these are some examples here of what you can do for that. So that's the start there. Let's see if we have any burning questions there. Monica, do we have any good questions yet that popped up? Otherwise, I will take some of the ones that were already there.
Hi, Reynold. One question is just resources for where folks can take Strengths Finders.
So if you Google Strength Finders, you will find it'll take you to the website, and you just plug your information in there, and that will tell you where to get it. So it's Clifton Strength Finders. Used to be Gallup, the polling organization. It's, again, there's like millions of data points, and this is why it's useful and very effective, because they've got so much information behind it to support it. So Strength Finder. So if you look at Clifton Strength Finders, Google that, it will take you to the site and how do I take it in. And then they will also give you the tools in many cases to take a look at and get some ideas as to where you go professionally with that.
Excellent. And we have one more. Where do we get the Myers-Briggs test done? The same.
Myers-Briggs. Okay, so Myers-Briggs, there's a lot of free versions out there. If you type in Myers-Briggs in Google, you will find in your favorite search engine, you will find any of a number of free ones. They generally have some sort of a marketing thing behind it. So, free is never free. If you want the classic and also the tool, they have some nice tools there for self-help on the Myers-Briggs. Just go to the Myers-Briggs Foundation, and you can take the test there, and then from there you can go and use some of the other tools that they have available on the website. And again, these all take typically less than a half hour, 45 minutes to do, and are not that expensive. and again, just help you build and stimulate some additional ideas there. Great. And so on this, thinking broadly, I love this one question. Somebody says, I'm looking for advice to move from procurement into the field of depth psychology, which is analytical psychology, also from Carl Jung, without a specific role identified. I'd like to transition because my current role is killing my soul. And I just want to say thank you very much to the person who wrote that, because one of the things I think that is so important, the reality is we're all going to have to work to 75 plus, and philosophically, there's a number of good reasons for that. One of the things I found out when I was at Stanford at the medical school doing my certificate in chronic disease was I came across all these great studies which say if you retire early, you die early. Most people live somewhere between 5 and 8 years on average after they retire. And as an anecdotal representation, my father was a family doctor who retired at 71, got bored, built another practice, retired at 82 because they told him he had to. And then he was still working, doing once a week in the office with friends until he was 88, and he lasted to 98. So anecdotally, that makes sense. So I think the thing is, you want to be finding something that you're passionate about, and we'll come to that later on as well. I have a specific point there, again, going back to Carl Jung as to why I think that's important. So here, making a plan for my professional life, what skills do I need to develop and where do I build my network? Okay, so going back to the strength finders, one of the points they make is that you have a natural talent, okay? And by the way, when you see the word talent, I always like to make the point is that that was originally a form of currency, was a money, a talent. And one talent in today's money is worth $5 million. So every talent that you have is worth $5 million. But the thing with a talent is if you bury it in the ground, it doesn't do much. You have to invest in it, practice, develop, build knowledge base, and that will then lead to your strengths. So Strength Finders helps you process this and take ownership of this. And I really encourage you to think about constantly taking your talents, what you're interested, investing the time to build them and go for the strengths. Because you constantly need to be developing new talents, new strengths rather, based on your talents to reflect where you are in the economy and where the economy is taking you. This is a handy way of thinking, and I've just alluded to it a little bit here, but you have at the top of the food chain, you've got your dominant talents. Then you have what are so-called supporting ones. These are the sort of the middle, sort of 10 to 12, 10 to 25, and then you have your lesser talents. And as I say, the key thing is really work on your dominant talents. If you have supporting talents that can help, and that as things change, where you invest in them and grow and build those into strengths, because, stem cell was not a word that in common usage until 1998. Things change, and space capsules was a dead-end business in the 70s, and now it's suddenly a booming again. So things do come around. And with respect to the lesser talents, particularly in today's world, find some place you can outsource that to. So that's the important thing, is you have your talents and you want to find ways to build on that and constantly be figuring out ways to improve it, because your balance sheet, that's what you're doing, is you're always building your balance sheet, and from there you can derive the income that flows from your balance sheet. But if you're not building, if you're not growing, you're dying. And that's not a fun place to be. So I, again, encourage you to be constantly thinking about what are some of the things that I haven't, what are some of the talents that I could do. And that's, again, going back to Strength Finders, Myers-Briggs, and others like that, is to find new opportunities that stimulate you and say, this is where I want to go and this is what I'd like to do. So let's see, do we have additional questions here, having popped through that section there? How to implement a job search in a depressed economy. Anything there, Monica? In the meantime?
The only question I have is, if a person is an INFJ, what part of the chart would they refer to for career ideas? So rather than the chart that you had earlier, what are some other resources?
So there are charts for every one of those those things there, and you will find them on the Myers-Briggs website. Okay.
Perfect.
So that's, I have a set for all of them. Again, didn't want to take the time. If you have follow-up questions, happy to answer them. But you know, if you are the INFP, absolutely, you know, there's all sorts of good, cool stuff out there. But you know, check the Myers-Briggs website. That'll give you some good starts there, and just build from there. So here's a question I had. I don't really have an industry that I fit into anymore, and I'm looking for something different going forward. This is the reality. It's always, you know, I chose this subject because people right now are in this depressed economy state. It's always a depressed economy for somebody, and it's always a booming economy for somebody. I mean, it's just a question of how you choose to look at it, and we'll come to that as well later on. The question is, where do I start? Is it worth trying to get a job? Absolutely. And how do I survive? And this is one of the things we'll touch on as well as we go through this. I love this quote from Walt Disney. You know, quit talking and begin doing. You know, and I also truly enjoy only dead fish go with the flow, because sometimes people have this, you know, California chill, and I'm saying, yeah, it's nice, but you know, there is other things to life as well. So you have to start doing, and part of what you will find, and this is the brilliance of the Valley, is it rewards iterative trials. It rewards people who try something, and maybe it works or maybe it doesn't. But if you keep trying and keep trying and keep trying, something will start to fit and go and work. And the key thing is, like it says in Frozen 2, do the right next thing. And if you keep doing the right next thing, then you can find a place where it will work for you, and you can build a career, and you can build the next 5 years, because the only thing you can do is control today, right? So if you're planning in 5-year chunks, remember, go back, you know, last 4 years takes a year. So you're planning in 5-year chunks. So one of the things to think about is if you have to work to 75 and you are now, say, 50, you've got 25 years, you've got 5-year blocks. You can do 5 separate careers over the next 25 years, and go and take a risk and make it happen there. I mean, I got my first job with a law firm back in the late 70s. The official inflation rate was over 10%. Unemployment was in close to 8%. And we were lucky to get a mortgage for a house at 12.65%, all right? It's all a question of, if you get out there, but again, you will never hit a ball that you don't swing at. So that's just one of the things you need to be prepared to do, is just get out there. I wanted to take this one on. If you Google resumes, how to make a resume, how to make a perfect resume, you'll wind up with something like about 3.97 million hits on Google in about 0.00025 seconds, okay? And I wanted to talk about this because it distresses me no end, because people have these ideas. The myth number one, the perfect resume will get me a great job, and it will get me the interview for the perfect job. And the reality is, if you're over 40, you should never send an unsolicited resume. I know that sounds a little provocative, but that's just been my experience. For everybody who does and got a job, God bless them. They're the exception that proves the rule. And why is that? That's because in today's world, resumes are not scanned by people. In the old days, you say, well, the resume gets, you know, somewhere between 10 and 15 seconds, and it was like it gets 5 seconds, and now it's all done by these scanners, and it gets like 0.0002 seconds. And so the resume is there, but it doesn't do anything. And I had an example where I knew a guy who's an engineer, and engineers are introverts, back to that INFP person. they're introverts, and they're always trying to figure out how to do things better. And since I'm an engineer, I appreciate this, and that's okay. But I'm an engineer, but I do some other things as well. So he said, I found this service, and they will do customized resumes for $10 a resume. I said, oh, that's interesting. He said, yeah, and they will send them out, and I'll, you know, so I can, for $10 a resume, they'll send out the perfect resume, and that's going to get me a job. And so he signed up for 1,000 resumes, $10,000. And I saw him about 6 months later and said, hey, how's it going? He said, well, out of 1,000 perfect resumes that got sent out, he had 6 calls, and 2 of them were for whether he had wanted to invest in a startup consulting firm. So the resume is simply there to confirm what you already do, but we'll go into why the resume should only be in response to a job that's already there, and so that it is tailored for that opportunity, and is tailored and is targeted marketing for you to help the person who is your internal champion advance your cause, as opposed to trying to find a perfect resume. So I did this one, you may have seen it. This is a flow chart of a typical search. And the point here is that, you know, up here in the corner, you've got the VP of sales quits and tells the CEO, and then you see the CEO calls the VP of HR, and the VP of HR, all things start to take off. The reality is you cannot get around this in any major organization. Nobody makes a decision by themselves. Not even Tim Cook. When Ron Johnson left to go run JCPenney after starting Apple Retail, it took them a year to find the first person. After 6 months, they had to fire him, and it took them another year to find the next person who did a great job, but lasted about 4 years. So again, the point is that this process is really convoluted. So again, don't rely on some recruiter by themselves to get you. This is the reality, is you have to go through this and find a way to navigate through this. And oh, by the way, 50% of them wind up down here in the middle. It's called relaunch. So after 6 months, they have to start all over again. So you're trying to create demand. That's why it takes a year, because you have to create demand to get the point where this is here. But it does work. It does work because you can create demand. I've seen it with my own life, with, for example, my own activities when I was shifting from a law firm into corporate practice. It took me about 7 months. Similarly, you know, one of my sons decided they wanted to pivot from building ballistic missiles to cybersecurity and go from system engineering into product marketing. Took them 8 months. But again, you create this, and we'll go over some of the ways to do that. Here is another tool that you can use, going back to Myers-Briggs and to your Strength Finders. Think about your passions, and here just on the top on the green bar, list out some of your passions. And based on that passion, think about the industries, okay? So here's a little thing here as to something here that might be interesting for you. So the thing is that you have a passion, you want to do marketing, and you want to do marketing, for example, in software, all right? And the position would be product marketing, so it's software, product marketing, and Microsoft. You know, this is a way for you to get you to think and stretch yourself, and also is a really good tool once you have the industries, the positions. You can ask friends, and we'll come back to this, why you need to have a lot of friends who can help you on this path here. But this, again, is a way just to get you to brainstorm to yourself and figure out where it is that you want to go. So it looks like we've got some nice AI, totally cool, definitely. Biotech is going to be happening. Cybersecurity, marketing, definitely. Education, HR, project management, web design, cool, wonderful. Other. We have a wonderful diverse group. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you all being here today. So this is a tool that you can use to stimulate industries to think about, positions to think about, and then companies to go after it. Because again, you're setting up a framework on which you can base, and we'll go back to this here. LinkedIn profile. that's the other question I wanted to leave you with here today is get the basics, okay? Make sure that you have your LinkedIn profile set up, that it's complete, it's up to date, and that it communicates a good, positive message about you. And it looks like there's something there. One of the biggest things that people miss is they don't use the banner. So you click on their profile and you've got the Stardust pattern behind it. It's like the person isn't even using the basic marketing tools that LinkedIn gives them. Think about that. That's a banner space, really helps communicate who you are and why you're special. The next thing is get a professional picture, or at least use the portrait mode on your iPhone or Samsung or Android device. Nothing looks so disconcerting as a fuzzy picture with all you can see is this nose that looks like Mount Fuji coming at you. You're not communicating a positive professional image when you do that. And again, LinkedIn is a standard. You need to play the game and recognize that people are looking at this and saying, is this person professional? Do they get it? Do they understand the basics? So again, you can get somebody with a DSLR, or you don't have to spend a great deal of money for this, or just, as I say, at least have somebody take the picture using the portrait mode. And as you are building your LinkedIn profile, you are constantly thinking, what problem are you the solution for? One of the things that we have to get into our heads is how I think about myself is really kind of irrelevant. I have to be there to solve somebody's problem. That's why they're hiring me, because I am a solution for a problem, and that's where they're going to reach out to me, they're going to connect with me. And if you set up and put in your profile where you solve problems, what problems have you solved, it becomes very clear what problems will you solve in the future. So think about that, of putting things in a language where you're communicating in that marketing of yourself. So create a target list of potential companies, identify what jobs are available, identify who to connect with, and then get the interview. Now, the target list, that's what we've just been talking about. What jobs are currently available gives you an idea of which areas, where is there a need. Based on that, what you want to do is then go back and say, who do I know at the company who might be helpful to me to get a sense as to what are the real needs, what are the unspoken needs that are there, what's keeping the hiring manager up? Because that's what really happens, is that the hiring manager gets the internal referral, and therefore on that basis we'll look at people. The 800 resumes that hit the site, those don't even get looked at, but they confirm that yes, we posted it. But it's really the internal referral. So what are the jobs, who do I know, and then how do I connect with this person? And there it's often important to think about who are the influencers around that person, so that you get the interviews, you get the coffee meetups with the people who are around your target position, so that they can give you the information and say, hey, this is what Susan is really worried about and why she's hiring for this position, right? And then on that basis, those people then become your internal champions and allow you to get the interview. So this is, and again, this is how 75% of the jobs are filled out there. The 25% of the jobs that you see posted are just literally 1/4 of the market. 75% are never posted. Because what happens is you talk to somebody, they look at you, they see what skill sets you have, and then they have enough of, the discussion goes around, and all of a sudden somebody says, it'd be really great to have this person on the team. That's an iterative process, Silicon Valley. Find your way through that process, and then get the internal champions to refer you, and they will get you an interview, so that you're going into the hiring manager with this notion of, hey, we want to get this person on the team. Hey, hiring manager, see if you can come up with something where you can adjust the skill set so it makes sense. that was the thing I had to do when I moved from corporate practice to, I'm sorry, from private practice, corporate practice as a lawyer. The first thing I had to do was I had to rewrite the job spec so it could get approved by personnel. I'd already been hired, but it was the old job spec, and now they needed a new one. And so tailored it to mine. And that happened decades later to one of my sons when he moved from, as I say, aerospace into cybersecurity. He had to do the same thing. So again, these are things where there's slots available, and then it's a matter of customized to you, but that's on the basis of the fact that you've been able to connect with people and they see you as a real person. Just pause here and see any questions. How are we doing
Hi,
here?
Reynold. Yeah, we have quite a few.
Okay.
Let's start with, so with finding connections and standing out, how do you do that now? Because before there were meetups, networking events, places to go and mingle and try to find that new connection. So do you have any recommendations of how you can find how to network now and to kind of make your way to that 75%?
So nothing has really changed much in that regard. I mean, it's a little more challenging, and you're doing it by phone calls, and there's through Zoom calls and what have you. I mean, I'm helping to staff up a startup here in the Valley, and we're doing it on the basis of multiple Zoom calls and things of this nature, and have hired 5 people in the last 2 months. So it's absolutely possible. What you need to do is go back and look at the LinkedIn profile, and it's part of the course that we have available. A little plug for the weekend seminar course that we do. But where it is a targeted approach to saying and doing just what I alluded to, where you figure out who do I need to connect with and who can connect me to that person, and then finding ways of having at least phone calls. And those phone calls can lead, in today's world, we're already now at socially distanced gatherings, what have you, so that you can probably get somebody to have a socially distanced coffee someplace. But it's finding somebody who will connect you from A to B to C to D, and it's going after it with a recognition that you're saying, I don't want a job, looking for an opportunity in product marketing at Facebook and Apple. Mm-hmm. Because if somebody sits there and says, hey, I need a job, then my recommendation is, well, if any job will do, I know Amazon and Starbucks are hiring. Okay. So, but that's not what I wanted to do. Well, so then you have to take ownership of it, going back to what we talked about. You need to take ownership of that and say, what is it? And here we're coming up here. What do I want to accomplish? Where do I want to go? And then by doing targeted networking through LinkedIn is a great tool. There's all sorts of cool ways to do that. You can build and grow and systematically make your way through it. There is no quick fix. This is not a 30 jobs in 30 days or something like this. People who sell you that kind of stuff are being unfair to you, and because that's not the way the world really works, at least not for the long term. You might get lucky. I mean, people do win in Las Vegas, but the house generally wins. So it's a situation where you want to be figuring out things of, how do I find a target? This is my target. This is what I'm going after. This is how I need to go after them. And you build that. And that's, again, part of what some of the skill sets are that you learn, and what I do as part of my career coaching practice.
Excellent. Thank you, Reynold. And then another question that kind of relates is, for early career folks that are still building their professional networks, what strategies do you suggest for digitally networking to connect with the right people? So is it like, can you just friend random
sure.
people on LinkedIn? How do you build your network?
So the way you build your network, the best way is always through referrals, okay? So everybody has, at a minimum, on LinkedIn, their college friends or somebody. They've got somebody who they've connected with, okay? Or they've connected with a teacher, professor, professional, they've done something, what have you. Just have a series of stars that radiate out from that central point, and who can that person connect you with? Because I get a lot of requests. If there's no connection, it's somebody who's living in Antarctica and is doing, sort of penguin farming. It doesn't work for me. Okay. But if it's somebody who's from one of my schools, from MIT, NYU, McGill, UCSC, or what have you, then I said, okay, let's see how I can, I'm happy to connect and welcome. And that's the reality too, is people, particularly if they're a little bit older, recognize there, but for the grace of God go I. So they're happy to help. But you just have to, as I said, but there has to be some sort of a connection. Dropping in, sort of random shots over doesn't really work. But if you have somebody who has a connection of some sort, then you can keep on going and build from there.
Excellent. Thank you, Reynold. And then one last small question here is, if you do make a connection with a referral, do you still apply online, or should you not apply? Some people think that conflicting applications might result in rejections. And is that true?
I would totally agree with that. Conflicting connections there generally is not a healthy way to go, because you confuse the market. Because what happens is that you've been having this great conversation with somebody about your unique skills and the things that you can really do and how you can help. And you're talking about, your real passion, okay, is being, conductor of an orchestra, and you've got all these skills, and you've studied music, and you play some instruments, and you do all this, okay. But there happens to be a job here at the symphony for somebody who's a stagehand. And you apply for that, and they say, like, what is it you want to? Do you want to be a conductor? Or do you want to be a stagehand? I'm confused now. And people, when they're confused, will say no. People, when in doubt, will no. People will always find a way, because from one perspective, well, we're being very thorough. We've examined like 2 million people, and we still haven't found the right person. So yeah, if you're on a situation where you're connecting with somebody, and they're mentoring you through the process, guiding you through the process, and getting you connected one-on-one, stay with that, unless they say, well, we need you to get into the system and do it this way. I would be very careful with that one, because again, generally you will be more successful creating a position that's custom made for you by continuing those discussions and following in that path. Okay. So just have to be mindful of time here. So here, this is lifetime career development practice. And what really drives me? What's my main goal? What do I want to accomplish? Another way to say is, what do I want my legacy to be? Okay. And then 5 habits you need to stick to at the end here. So let me go through some of this. So one of the things that you really need to do and recognize at this time, especially, but throughout your life, but particularly at this time, is the power of your beliefs. You've heard it a times, your thoughts determine your life, okay? But this also means you have to confront your limiting beliefs. You have to confront your limiting beliefs. If you are stuck in a, I'm not good enough, that's exactly where you'll wind up. Because if you can't project you're good enough, nobody else will buy it from you. So one of the things you need to do is change that, pivot, all right? We love to pivot. So you need to change your beliefs, your limiting beliefs, into what I call a liberating reality. People may have different terms, but I find this one useful. So the first thing is, you have to recognize your limiting belief. I don't have enough time, okay? You have to record that belief. As long as I just say I don't have enough time and I don't write it down, it's not real, because I can always fudge it. Well, I sort of have, but no. Your belief is, I don't have enough time. So you have to record that. Then you have to think about the belief, and it's like, why? Why do I say that? Okay. Then you have to reframe that belief and say, well, actually, I have all the time in the world to do the things that are most important to me. Now, if that's watching Netflix for 4 hours a day, that's what's most important to you. All right. But don't tell me you don't have any time if you're watching Netflix for 4 hours, right? And finally, you have to revise the belief and put it in a way so that you can reorient yourself. I have all the time to do what's really important to me. And that's, I think, really super critical. So you have to take these one by one and figure out what is it that's blocking you. Where are you getting in your own way? Because my experience is most people get stuck in this limiting belief. I don't have this mindset of poverty as opposed to a mindset of plenty. And until you move from poverty into plenty, you're going to get stuck here. And it's very, very difficult to do anything about it. I created this, and back to the person who was talking about, the Carl Jung. This is something I developed out of doing a lot of connections with 12-step programs over the years, which are absolutely amazing. I mean, it's really fascinating to me. 40 years ago, self-help, 12-step, Alcoholics Anonymous is the most famous, were considered, no, that's all hand waving. No, there's nothing there. By now, dozens and dozens of studies that actually show it does work. And what does it work is, where is my center? I have to be connected to something that's bigger than me, a higher power, however you wish to choose to call it. But you have to get focused that that's something at your core that can never be taken from you, right? And if you read Viktor Frankl's works, or what Elie Wiesel has done, or any of these people have gone through tremendous stuff, it's this higher power that fixes, and that's what fixes also, and is core to the 12-step programs. Then you have the immediate, spouse, partner, those things, and then you get into the family. Those are all super important relations. Those help define how people think of you and how you think of yourself. In this fourth ring here, we have work. And my career coaching, a lot of my career coaching is getting people who've gotten so stuck with thinking that work belongs in the center. And as a result, their moods go like this based on their job. That's a horrible place to be. Push work out to there, and then you stay whole and centered, because that's where you'll be most successful long term. And by the way, skip the world. Watching hours of constantly negative news, if it bleeds, it leads. It just is a waste of time for you, especially at times like this. Get back to focusing on yourself, your family, and where you can be productive going forward. So I just give you this as perhaps a little idea to think about where you want to go with this going forward. Here are 5 things you should be doing. Always be building and maintaining your network. When you're building it, also don't forget to maintain. If you've got somebody who is a really good source and gave you a couple of referrals, loop back to them and say, hey, Joe, thank you so much. I talked to Susie and I talked to Phyllis. They were awesome. Thank you so much. And you know what? Joe may well have a few more people to talk to. Because if you're a good networker, you don't give your best people away on the first round. You want to see if the person is serious. If they're serious, then you're happy to work with them. But people who sit there and say, oh, who do you know? Introduce me, whatever. But if they never do anything with it, so that's why you have to maintain. So maintain your network. Number 1, you need to find an accountability partner. Whoever that happens to be, it can be a friend or whatever, but you need to find somebody who you check in with at least every 2 weeks and say, how am I doing? How am I doing? What should I be doing? And they will sit there and say, well, 2 weeks ago, you said you were going to do these 3 things. Have you done them? No. Well, then go do them, right? An accountability partner is critical. And sometimes that's what I see in for example, my personal training coaching and Ironman coaching is people pay me so that I make sure they do. I have assigned them all of these things to do. And then I sit there and say, have you done them? Or I walk them through and force them to do it. And that's some of the things. You need to have somebody do that if you're going to be successful. You need to find a personal support group. You need to find people who affirm you as a person. If it takes a year to find a new job, that's a really emotionally devastating process at times, because you're constantly dealing with rejection. And aside from some 21-year-old super sales guys, I don't know anybody who does well with 99% rejection. And that's often what a job search will feel like. You need to have people who affirm you. Friends, family, whatever, who just get there and say, You're a great person. We love to be with you. We affirm you as a person. You need to find a career board of advisors. These are people who you see as people who are experienced, have success in different areas, and who you talk to periodically, yeah, maybe once every 3 months or so, who you say, I'm thinking about going in this career, thinking about this type of thing. That's where you want to, be focused on finding people who can help you in those different aspects of your life. Then you find mentors for the other parts of your life. By doing this, you are able to have people who support you and are pushing you to be ever more expanding, because it gets really tedious if you are just a single person and aren't exploring all of the other things that are valuable in your life there. So I'd just like to wrap up here since we're coming up on the end and I want to save some time for questions. If you can do a job, tell me, yes, you can, then figure out how to do it, okay? I've had people who've said, oh, this job was perfect, except I can't do this thing. I was like, then spend 10 hours on Khan Academy or YouTube videos, what have you, and learn how to do it. These are all skills that can be built. So thank you very much for that. And Monica, do we have some more questions there?
Hi, Reynold. Yes, we do have about 10 questions. So let's see how, if we can get through some of these.
Would love to.
So I'm going to combine a couple of these. So how does somebody figure out how to match a job based on their Myers-Briggs score? Are there resources for that?
Sure. So one of the things to do is if you go to Myers-Briggs, they will lay out, okay, let me just step back a second. Myers-Briggs will never say you can't do a job because you are a particular Myers-Briggs type. They'll always be very careful to say, if you really want it and you work hard, you can do it, okay? But I mean, there's a lot of really good public speakers who are introverts, so as an aside. But they have resources there, and they will have tables in the Myers-Briggs website where they will point you to things that you can think about if you are a particular type, and then how to look at that and map your Myers-Briggs type onto various types of careers. That's the best place to go is to the Myers-Briggs website there.
Excellent, thank you. If you've been out of a job for a while, how do you get back in the industry, and how do you explain for the gap?
So this goes back to the networking. Okay, if you've been out for more than 3 to 6 months, it's extremely difficult. The response rate, if you send an unsolicited resume, and this has been proven by various studies over the years, and what have you, is less than 0.01%. I mean, it's people won't even bother to acknowledge. The only way that you can get around that is you go back to who knows me and who would trust me to do something new. I'll give you an example. I knew one guy who had been fired as a CEO of a mid-sized company, very publicly, okay? His career, he was in his mid-50s, his career was over. It was done with, okay? So we were going through this like, what can I possibly do? How can I ever get back from something like this? And what we did was we went back, and this is one of the things that you can do when I talk about a super resume in the course, is you go back and you identify people from 10, 15, 20 years ago who still know you as a person. And what we did is we went back to his consulting days, and we found out where his best buddies, I mean, they had gone through all sorts of projects many years together. And he found somebody who was looking for an advisor as a CEO of a $4 billion+ business, but wasn't going to be worried about this person trying to take his job, because clearly he would never be considered for that. But as an advisor, as somebody who understood what he as a CEO was going through, how to deal with the board, how to deal with these issues, it was a perfect match. And he wound up doing well financially. It took 6 months, and a lot of phone calls and a lot of coffee meetings, but that's what you need to do. It's step by step by step by step. And it's the referral. It's generally the fourth or fifth referral before you really start to hit pay dirt. Okay.
That helps. Thank you. I think we might have time for one more. So there's quite a few questions about this, and I'm just going to summarize. So one general question is, I'm of a certain age, and I'm not sure if going back to school or getting a different type of a degree, master's, PhD, for my next profession is feasible. So what should I do? And then another very common question we're getting is, I have a degree in maybe a marketing field, but I have no technical background. So does getting an online certificate or a certificate in general make a difference for the hiring managers?
So I'll give you an example. I had a friend of mine who is 25 years at Slack, always on the cusp of being able to get a Nobel Prize. And then they shut down the lab. Life happens. And he could have moved back east, but he chose to stay in the area. And what he figured out was that he understood programming, because that's a lot of what he did when he was looking for these incredibly tiny little particles whizzing around the universe. And he went back and he invested the time and in about 4 months, 3-4 months that he took to just get some specific, like Python and a couple of other things, brush up those commercial skills. And at the same time as he was doing this, he was networking with friends to determine what jobs were available out there as a Python programmer, and anyway, how to make that happen. And by the time he got finished the course, it took him about another month, and he had a job as a programmer. He was like, quote unquote, way overqualified, but he could do the job, and he was successful doing it, and he built out. So the thing is, the skills, going back and getting this course work, specific skills can be useful if there's a targeted thing like that. The flip side of it is, and that's one of the beauties of courses at Silicon Valley Extension, for example, is you will meet other people, and you will meet and have a diversity of connections. And that's the powerful advantage to in-person teaching still, and why universities are so good for generating those kinds of ideas is because you meet new people, you make connections, and you're building your network at the same time. So you're taking classes, but you're building your network. And that is, again, another way to pivot there. But in my case, I've gone from wanting to be an airline pilot, a lawyer, in business, coaching, executive search, Ironman coach. It's you just have to figure out what it is that you're passionate about, and just keep working at it. And in COVID, by the way, I just did another certification in as a nutrition coach to sort of solidify some of the things I've been talking about there. So it's always possible. But it's a question of deciding you're going to make a step forward as opposed to sitting there and saying, I'm too busy.
Reynold, thank you so much. I know that a lot of the other comments we've gotten and questions we've gotten were people just very grateful for the lecture. There are a few other questions that I'll send over to you later.
Okay.
Everyone else, I'm sorry that we couldn't get to all of them. You can email us at extension@ucsc.edu. We'll also be sending the recording and the lecture slides by tomorrow, so you can always respond back to that email. Thank you everyone again for attending. Look forward to seeing you next week at our next Job Market Insights webinar. Thank you, Reynold.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone.